The deal is done, or is it? An apparent plan for peace at last between Israel and Hamas. Jubilation in Gaza and Tel Aviv tonight that after 15 months of bloodshed, the warring sides appear to have agreed a ceasefire in 3 phases for 6 weeks initially, as the process begins of releasing hostages and withdrawing troops. But even tonight, as we go on air and as Palestinians celebrate, a word of caution from Benjamin Netanyahu: we are not there yet. We look at how peace could pan out and what might happen next. Also tonight, here a glimmer of light for the Chancellor as inflation falls in December, raising hopes of a rate cut. Led down by a chaotic system, a damning new report on how English schools are failing children with special needs. Remembering Linda Nolan, the entertainer and cancer campaigner who passed away today, surrounded by her sisters. And the Vatican thriller Conclave leads the way in today's BAFTA nominations.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. We start tonight with breaking news from the Middle East, where Israel and Hamas are said to have agreed a ceasefire deal in Gaza. The landmark agreement was confirmed by sources on both sides this afternoon, and also by the President-elect Trump, and comes after months of negotiations. But in the past half an hour, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said there are still details to be ironed out tonight. Well, if today's agreement does stand, it will see all fighting pause for at least 6 weeks and the release of 33 Israeli hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. In news of the deal, as it was met on the streets of Israel and Gaza with cries of joy and tears of relief. In Tel Aviv tonight, the families of those taken hostage on October the 7th have gathered in Hostage Square, as they have on so many evenings since that terrible day. Along with the rest of the country, they have fresh hope tonight of seeing their loved ones again. In Gaza, Palestinians too can dream of hoping again. Thousands have been dancing in the streets at what could be the end of a nightmarish war. Israel's unrelenting campaign against Hamas has, they say, killed 47,000 people and forced millions more from their homes. Well, tonight is only the start of the process, and there are more negotiations to come. Our senior international correspondent Jen Irvine reports on an historic day and the promise of peace.
On the Gaza Strip, electricity may be in short supply, but amid the darkness this evening, cheers broke out as the news came through. After 466 days of failure, today was the peacemakers' day to announce success. In the centre of Tel Aviv, on the plaza renamed Hostage Square, many Israelis gathered, hoping to hear that the dream they've been dreaming for 15 months was really coming true. Any reluctance to believe it is understandable. Sadly, this war is not over yet, and the breakthrough has come too late for the Palestinian victims of the latest Israeli airstrikes on Gaza. There could be more of these bombings to come, as peace may not be realized before Sunday, when the ceasefire is supposed to come into effect. This all began with Hamas inflicting on Israel its darkest ever day, and ended up being the deadliest war ever for the Palestinian people. The catastrophic levels of destruction and the shocking civilian death toll on the Strip reverberated far and wide. Gaza's systematic demolition threatened to ignite this region, stirring other conflicts stretching from Lebanon to Iran and Yemen. Now this incendiary war may at long last be coming to an end. The first Israeli hostages should be set free soon, and the process is likely to be similar to what happened during that brief lull in the fighting way back in November 2023. However, it's now more than a year later, and Israeli hospitals have been told to expect the newly released captives to be in a far worse condition than these people were. So hostages like the Bibas family may be free within days. The baby's second birthday is on Saturday. For relatives, the last few weeks of anticipation, being tantalizingly close to a ceasefire, have been another form of torture.
It's time to end this war. It's time to prove that humanity can win, and people who are taken from their homes in their pajamas will be reunited with their loved ones.
Having been on the receiving end for 1 year and 3 months, tonight should be one of unbridled joy on the Gaza Strip. Their nightmare may be coming to an end, and something other than Israeli warplanes may soon be on their horizon. Peace and possibilities, perhaps. John Irvine, ITV News, Tel Aviv.
Now, if it all goes to plan, the ceasefire deal is expected to come into force from Sunday, starting an initial 6-week pause in fighting. The first phase of the deal will see 33 of the Israeli hostages held by Hamas released over a staggered period in exchange for a number of Palestinian prisoners held in Israel. The volume of humanitarian aid entering Gaza will also increase. Israel will begin withdrawing troops, but will keep a presence in the Philadelphia corridor in the south of Gaza and also in a buffer zone along the Israel-Gaza border. The second phase would see all remaining Israeli hostages returned and a full withdrawal of Israeli troops. And in a third phase, plans will be agreed for a 3 to 5 year reconstruction of Gaza under supervision from Egypt, Qatar and the UN. Those last two phases are subject to negotiations still. But there's no question today that it seems that it is a really monumental breakthrough. Well, in a moment, we will hear from John Irvine in Tel Aviv and our US correspondent Dan Rivers. But first, let's go to our international editor, Emma Murphy, who is in Hostage Square in Tel Aviv, where many of the families have been waiting for this moment. Emma, what's the sense there? What are you hearing there tonight?
Well, the sense here and the atmosphere is incredibly calm and very subdued. There has been no great scenes of celebration. People are exhausted and fearful. And they're very fearful about what comes next. They're fearful that this actually is an agreement that will go through the whole process and that will actually not stall at any point. And for so many, there is a fear about what they're going to learn in the hours and days ahead, because so many of those families of the at least 98 who are still missing don't know whether they're dead or alive, and they're now having to face the possibility that they will know for sure in the not too distant future. For those who know that their relatives are dead, they are now waiting to retrieve their bodies, and they are living in the great fear, as so many here have told me this evening, about what happens if those bodies don't come back, what their life will be like with the continuing sense of loss without anybody that they have suffered for over 466 days now. And of course, that stands opposed to the scenes that we've seen in Gaza, which are much more jubilant but calm as the Israeli attack continues there. I think there is also a sense of fear from people we've spoken to in that area that this may not completely go the whole way, whether or not there will be peace and whether or not it will be, most importantly, a lasting peace.
Emma, these negotiations have been incredibly tense, haven't they, and continue to be so?
Yeah, I mean, it's been on and off all the way through the course of today, as we've seen over so many more months, and it is still far from done. I know that there are many procedural things that will kick in over the next few days, and the Israeli military are now planning Operation Wings of Freedom. That's how they're going to get the hostages, dead and alive, out of there. But of course, there are things like court hearings that need to be held, because there will be some Palestinian prisoners released. Some of those have been convicted of murder, and the families of those victims will be allowed to go to court to appeal against those releases. So that will slow things down. Normally they have around 48 hours to do that, to try and speed things up. That has been cut to 24. So that's why we're expecting it will probably be Sunday after the Shabbat that they will start to see the release of hostages and also the release of prisoners and aid going into the Gaza Strip, which is so crucially needed. But of course, nobody here, nobody in Gaza, and I doubt in any of the seats of power around the world, feels 100% confident this evening that this is the start, but will not necessarily reach the absolute end. It could be a very difficult few weeks ahead.
Emma Murphy in Hostage Square in Tel Aviv, thank you. Well, let's go to Dan Rivers now in Washington, D.C. Dan, what's the reaction from Washington this evening?
Well, Mary, you may not be surprised that President-elect Donald Trump has wasted no time in trying to take credit, really, for getting this deal over the line. We know that his envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, has been involved in kind of unprecedented parallel negotiations at the same time as the outgoing Biden administration. He put out a statement on Truth Social just in the last hour or so, saying this epic ceasefire agreement could only have happened as a result of our historic victory in November, as it signalled to the entire world that my administration would seek peace and negotiate deals to ensure the safety of all Americans and our allies. I am thrilled America and Israeli hostages will be returning home to be reunited with their families and loved ones. And he went on to say, we've achieved so much without even being in the White House. Just imagine all the wonderful things that will happen when I return to the White House and my administration is fully confirmed, so they can secure more victories for the United States. We are waiting to hear from President Joe Biden at the moment. We've certainly seen the podium being prepared inside the White House. He'll certainly want to try and get his side of this long protracted negotiation out, a deal which in essence is pretty much the same deal that had been hammered out and they thought they were going to get over the line back in the summer. Joe Biden will want to try and claim this as part of his legacy in the final few days before he leaves office.
The time being in Washington, thank you. We will return to Washington, no doubt, as and when Joe Biden does speak. But from the Hamas terror attack on October the 7th to the destruction of Gaza, this conflict has exposed both Israelis and Palestinians to unimaginable horrors. Neil Connery takes a look back at a war that has unleashed terror, trauma and death.
More than 460 days old, more than 46,000 people dead. But at last this war may now be coming to an end. The bloodiest chapter in this long-running, intractable conflict began when Hamas launched a brutal attack on Israel on October the 7th, 2023. Killing at point-blank range, raping and burning on their way. 800 of the 1,200 people they murdered were civilians.
100 people from this kibbutz are missing or dead. That's unbearable. There are only 400 people in this community.
For those they didn't kill, their 250 hostages, there was a living hell awaiting in Gaza.
I think you know what I'm fearing. That she's been hurt. I don't even want to imagine what they're doing to her.
The Israeli military set about bringing down not just buildings, but whole neighborhoods, saying it was the only way to target Hamas. The death toll skyrocketed. More than half of those killed are thought to have been women and children.
We are terrified. People who are walking the streets only think about, is this house going to be bombed? Is this house going to be bombed? Why are we living like this? We don't need to think about these things.
The killings of civilians waving white flags left the IDF with difficult questions to answer.
We couldn't believe it happened. How was he shot? He was carrying the white flag, the symbol of peace, not of killing or violence.
90% of Gaza's population were forced to flee their homes. Most became confined to small tented enclaves where survival depended on aid that rarely came. Israel battered Hezbollah in Lebanon into a ceasefire with the pager plot in September last year. The assassination of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar made them more isolated than ever. Now Israel and Hamas appear to be on the brink of being forced to do what they haven't been able to manage in more than 15 months. Give peace a chance. Neil Connery, ITV News.
Well, let's go to John Irvine in Tel Aviv. John, from Neil's piece, you may have just heard the terrible suffering on both sides. What will this deal mean for everyone?
Good evening, Mary. I don't think you and I can actually imagine what it means, particularly to the people of Gaza. On the Strip tonight, something like 1.9 million people are bedding down in temporary accommodation, most of them under canvas because their homes have been obliterated. They don't know if they'll wake up tomorrow morning because of Israeli airstrikes and IDF activity. They've been dying at a rate of something like 100 people each and every day over the last 15 months. They don't know where their next meal is coming from. If this ceasefire goes through, it will be redemption and salvation. Let's think about the hostages trapped in darkness, in tunnels, emaciated, terrified, dehydrated. May their living hell soon be over. Let's hope so. I have to tell you, Mary, everyone here in Israel, on the West Bank, on the Gaza Strip, is exasperated and exhausted by this war. No one's pretending that the situation in Israel is as bad as it is on the Gaza Strip. But the Israelis too are traumatized. The IDF is a citizens' army. Everyone knows a soldier who's been serving in Lebanon or Gaza. The Gaza war has cost the lives of more than 800 Israeli soldiers. The night before last, everyone living here in South Tel Aviv was woken up at 3 in the morning by yet another air raid siren as another Houthi missile headed this way. If there is a ceasefire, hopefully that will come to an end. Everyone needs this to be over. This has been a ghastly limbo. People need to get on with their lives. They need to see a future. Yes, hopefully hostages and Palestinian prisoners will be released. But to some extent, everyone in this area is going to be set free.
John Irvine in Tel Aviv, thank you. Well, there is plenty more still to come on the ITV Evening News, including we follow 3 children in care in Birmingham, fostered by their grandmother and left homeless for 5 months.
How could the system allow the 3 children under a care order to be homeless and to be in a car? What did they expect us to do?
We're about to choose the most famous man in the world.
And 1.25 billion souls watching.
Let's say this is a pretty fair vision.
And the BAFTA list is out with Conclave and Emilia Perez leading the nominations. Would you join us for that and more after the break? Hope to see you then. Hello again, welcome back. There was a welcome dose of good news for the under-pressure Chancellor Rachel Reeves today. Inflation in December was lower than expected at 2.5%. driven by a drop in hotel and restaurant prices. Now, economists say it could lead to a cut in interest rates when the Bank of England meets next month. But businesses are still counting the cost of last year's budget, which could lead to higher prices and lower wages. Our economics editor, Joel Hills, has this.
The government promises a boom in house building, so it's not a bad time to be a supplier to construction companies. But price rises here haven't really stabilised yet, and there's more inflation in the pipeline. This business says the tax rises and the increase to the minimum wage the Chancellor announced in her budget will add £1 million a year to their costs.
We'll put our prices up where we can, yeah. Now, in real terms, 3, 4, 5%. Will we get it? I can't see it. You know, it's a very competitive market at the moment. We'll try and we'll negotiate best we can on every job we price, and we price to win.
However you measure it, the inflation news is encouraging. The headline annual rate has fallen significantly from 11% in October 2022. Last month, it eased to 2.5%. Core inflation, which excludes volatile food and energy prices, also faded by more than expected to 3.2%. And services inflation, which the Bank of England has been particularly worried about, took a big step down to 4.4% in December, although all three measures remain above the bank's 2% target.
Well, it's good that inflation is coming down to target, but we know the cost of living is still a pressure for many families across the country, and there's more work to do. When the Chancellor in this government talked about bringing stability back to the economy and our politics, this was an important part of that.
There's still plenty of upward pressure on prices. Businesses face higher costs as a result of the budget. VAT is now being charged on private school fees. Gas and food prices have both risen, and water bills are set to jump by 20% in April. Inflation is expected to edge up again in the months ahead. The dip in inflation looks temporary but is timely. Markets have appeared to fret about the UK's economic prospects of late. Today, instead of selling our government's bonds, investors were buying them. An interest rate cut next month is back on the cards. But what happens next depends to some extent on events in the United States.
The elephant in the room is what Mr. Trump does.
It's amazing how much of this comes back to Donald Trump.
Well, if you have a president who's as potentially disruptive as he might be, I mean, if he does, even 70% of what he's saying, then, I'm afraid we're a small open economy. And when the elephant moves, we are inevitably affected.
Tonight, the government's borrowing costs have eased a little, along with pressure on the Chancellor. Rachel Reeves spent this morning breakfasting entrepreneurs. If she is going to deliver on her promise to raise living standards in this Parliament, she urgently needs more business investment and the economy to start firing. Joel Hills, ITV News in Preston.
A damning new report has accused the education system of failing children with special needs and disabilities. MPs on the Public Accounts Committee say parents in England are being let down by a chaotic system with vastly different outcomes depending on where they live. Teachers tell us the system is at the point of collapse. Our social affairs correspondent Sarah Corker reports.
So what's going on there, Bo?
For more than 2 years, Bo, who has autism, has been out of formal education, not on the roll of any school. Since 2022, ITV News has been following this family's fight for help. Today, the struggle continues.
Bo's already saying now, but Mummy, I've missed so much of school. I'm scared. I said, Bo, don't worry about it, because at this moment in time, you're not ready for mainstream at all.
The 10-year-old suffered daily panic attacks at a mainstream school in Leeds that couldn't support her.
Do you feel you've been let down by the system?
I feel angry. I feel angry because why should we have to suffer so much stress for something that should be basically a human right? Why do we have to fight for that? We shouldn't. It should be there, offered.
And their struggle is far from unique.
Today's damning report describes a chaotic system that's failing a generation of children and putting nearly half of all councils at risk of bankruptcy.
Demand for education, health and care plans, a legal document setting out additional support for a child, has soared by 140% in a decade. Plans should be issued within 20 weeks, but there are huge regional differences. The darker the colour, the poorer the performance. Southampton and Barnet issued 100% of plans within that time frame, but Leicester, the Isle of Wight and Essex failed to meet any targets.
Here you go!
At this primary school in Leeds, 21% of children have special educational needs, a figure that's doubled in 5 years.
We are having more and more children join us with more complex needs, which is stretching our system to a breaking point, and we don't have the support, we don't have the resources, we don't have the funding that we need to give these children the best chance that they've got.
And when pressed today on the SEND system all but bankrupting councils, the Education Secretary had few answers.
The inheritance that we have is one where councils are facing incredible financial difficulties. I understand that, it's across government.
Back in Leeds, Bo just wants to learn.
I can't speak fluently in German, I'm learning it.
Her parents say getting a place at a specialist school would be like winning a golden ticket. Sarah Corker, ITV News.
Yeah. Family and friends have been remembering the singer and actress Linda Nolan, who died today at the age of 65. The Irish star rose to fame, performing alongside her sisters in The Nolans. Her manager today said her siblings were with her as she died. Carrie Davis looks back on her remarkable life.
So come on and hold me tight,
Linda Nolan, seen here with the era-defining bouncy blowout, was one of the sisters who sang their way into the spotlight with this disco classic. The Nolans became one of the biggest British groups of the 70s and early 80s.
Gonna rock you now.
Today, the siblings shared the news of Linda's peaceful passing, describing her as a pop icon who will never be forgotten. After leaving the Nolans, she pursued a solo career and later found success on the stages of the West End. Friends and fellow stars remember her talent.
She was a powerhouse. She had the most amazing voice. She was so funny, so witty, and such a consummate professional and a lovely lady.
Linda became a columnist and TV panellist, at times appearing on Loose Women alongside her sister Colleen. This morning, a tribute was paid to her on the show.
Linda's legacy extends beyond her incredible achievements in music and entertainment. She was a beacon of hope and resilience.
I am living with cancer, but I will not let it define me.
For 2 decades, Linda lived with cancer in one form or another. Last year, she revealed it spread to her brain. She was determined to keep the showbiz sparkle, but also became a dedicated campaigner and helped raise millions for charity.
Well, I think she'll be remembered for lots of things, but I think, you know, the most amazing thing about Linda is I think she'll continue to save women's lives through early diagnosis, through encouraging people to go for screening and so on, long after today.
Saving lives and spreading joy to millions. That's Linda Nolan's legacy.
You are watching the ITV Evening News. It's a little bit after 7 o'clock. Here's what's still ahead. A ceasefire has been agreed between Israel and Hamas in Gaza after months of negotiation. We will bring you the latest.
The Pope is dead. The throne is vacant.
The conclave.
Conclave and Amelia Perez lead the nominations at the BAFTAs.
And I'm here at Greenwich Peninsula, where thanks to some of the best known artists in the country, we've seen a splash of colour on what has been a very grey day overhead. How bright is it going to be in the days ahead? Join me for the full national forecast coming up later in the programme.
And that is all coming. But before all that, a shocking and alarming insight into how the country's most vulnerable children are cared for. ITV News has been following the story of 3 siblings in Birmingham. They live with their grandmother, Sonia, but because they're under a care order, it is ultimately social services who are responsible for the children's safety. And yet, for 5 months, they were homeless, moved between hotels and overcrowded rooms, crammed into spaces that were utterly unfit for a young family. At one point, the council even tried to move them to a homeless shelter associated with drug taking and criminality. It raises serious questions about how many others are being left by social services to fend for themselves. Our investigations editor Daniel Hewitt has this special report on Britain's forgotten families.
They live in the shadows. Britain's hidden children. In a creaking care system and now homeless. These siblings were legally removed from their mum 6 years ago and placed under the care of social services. Rescued by their nan, Sonia, who is now their foster carer. But then they were given a no-fault eviction by their private landlord and now can't find anywhere affordable to live.
We've been homeless now for 8 weeks. Social services are meant to be helping, we're meant to be doing it as a joint, and they've literally done nothing to help us. They've got to the stage now where they don't even bother to reply back to me.
We followed the family for 3 months. 3 siblings whose identities we're protecting, not yet teenagers. They're under a care order, which means Birmingham City Council has ultimate parental responsibility for their well-being.
No fridge, no nothing, no internet.
They need stability. Instead, they're sharing beds in a single room, bouncing between budget hotels, living transient lives in temporary shelter.
Were social services aware that you were being evicted and you had nowhere to go?
Right from the very beginning, right from 16 months ago, they knew right from the start. And basically, their answer was, oh, you'll get somewhere, you won't be homeless. On the day that we had to get out the property on the 11th of June, I said they had nowhere for us. I literally sat in the car crying because we was homeless. How could the system allow like the 3 children under a care order to be homeless and to be in a car? What did they expect us to do?
Despite being homeless, Sonia said the children were not visited by a social worker for 8 weeks. No risk assessment was carried out on where they've been living. And then, while we're filming,
hello,
she gets a call.
Can I speak to Speaking.
It's from the council's housing department, telling them they are going to have to move again today.
Can I just quickly ask, what is it? Is it a hotel? Is it flats? What is it? A homeless centre? It's a shared kitchen with other people? You should think so. Let me just quickly say to you, I have 3 children under a care order. So how's that a safeguarding issue to the children? But surely you would know some answers. You've just rang me and you've just told me that's where me and the children have got to go. Right, no worries, I shall ring them then. Thank you, bye-bye.
So you had no contact from social services about this move?
No.
A text message confirms the family's hotel booking has now been cancelled. They must pack up and get out.
Sonia's now ringing social services, but we've had a quick look at the place they're trying to send the family to, and the reviews are horrendous. There has been several newspaper articles about how bad this place is. Cockroaches, mould, rats outside, drug dealers, rampant antisocial behaviour.
There are currently more homeless children in England than any time on record. It means even the most vulnerable, including those in care, are no longer guaranteed a place to live. 2 hours later, and bags packed, we're on our way with Sonia and the children across the other side of Birmingham, to the homeless centre she's been told by housing she has no choice but to accept, despite raising concerns for the children's safety.
Their mum are in, like, temporary accommodation. Their mum could be in there. It's just a risk issue completely.
The children's mom is not allowed any contact with them, but social services has not carried out an assessment of who lives here.
I've worked all my life and whatever, and it's resulted into this with 3 children under a care order. I just think that the system is completely and utterly wrong in every single way. Oh God, blimey. Right. Yeah. I don't want us to take that.
Time is not on Sonia's side, but with no help or advice from social services, she must make this impossible choice alone.
I just fear for the children. It's not fair for them. They're beautiful children. They're literally my life. They are, and everybody knows us. They know how close me and the children are. They've been through so much trauma. I'm not gonna put them through this.
So how many are in here
There's 3 of us in here, so it's myself and 2 children. So
almost 3 months later, and they've still got nowhere.
So I share the bed with one of the children, and the other child is on the airbed on the floor.
The family are squeezed into Sonia's mum's 2-bed bungalow.
One of the children sleeping in here with my mum, who's 73.
Her own 16-year-old son sleeps on the sofa in the living room. After refusing the homeless centre, Sonia was told she'd made herself intentionally homeless.
Would you call it neglect,
Yeah.
what you've been through with the children?
Yep.
Would you?
Definitely. It's heartbreaking because most nights when I pick them up from school, the first thing they all say to me is, "Have you found us a house?" And I have to say no. I just want a smile on their faces to be able to say, yes, we've got a house, we've got somewhere to live now.
Sonia stepped forward when she was needed most, no hesitation. But her most desperate hour has been met with silence.
Well, it was an appalling story. I mean, heart has to go out to Sonia and those poor children. What's been the reaction to this?
Well, we took the findings of our investigation to the man that led the independent national review into children's social services in England 2 years ago, Josh McAllister MP, who recommended widespread reform of the system. We showed that story you've just seen there to him. He said it's one of the most shocking and extreme cases he has seen. This is what he said to us.
The situation she's been put into there is shocking and shouldn't happen. If it broke down, those kids might enter the care system where they may end up not being placed in a home together. They might be separated, which would be even more difficult for them. And these are the kind of situations that, you know, should be a wake-up call really for the care system.
We put our findings to Birmingham Council. Birmingham Children's Social Services has said to us that they've been supporting Sonia with her housing needs, but recognised that we could have taken greater steps to resolve the situation more quickly for her and the children, and they plan to reflect on the learning from this case. The Cabinet Member for Housing for the Council said that they're in the grips of a national housing crisis. They're seeing unprecedented demand with thousands wanting and needing to live in a home. They said they have now been glad to help the family into accommodation. I can tell you before Christmas, they were offered private accommodation through the council. It's a 3-bed property. It isn't big enough really for them, but it's better than where they're at now. It took 5 months for that offer to come through. Sonia's main issue here is 2 things. One, the complete lack of communication to her from social services, but also between social services and the housing department. But in those statements we received, and since this report, as we put out this evening, no apology from the council to Sonia.
Appalling. Daniel Hewitt, thank you for that. OK, well, let's go back to our top story tonight in the last few minutes. President Biden has confirmed a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. It lays out plans for a 6-week pause in fighting from Sunday, with further negotiations over a permanent peace. It would also see 33 Israeli hostages released initially in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Well, let's return to our international editor, Emma Murphy, who's in Tel Aviv for us tonight. So, Emma, a lot going on tonight, as we are now hearing. Confirmation, then, of an agreement is actually coming.
Yes, indeed. The talks that have brought this ceasefire deal to fruition have been carried out in Doha. They've been hosted by the Qataris, the Egyptians and the US to try and get some kind of agreement between the 2 protagonists, Hamas and also Israel. And so this evening it fell to the Qatari Prime Minister to announce that formally this ceasefire deal has been agreed.
We are committed. We will continue to do everything we can, everything possible, together with our partners to ensure that this deal is implemented as it's agreed. And this deal will bring us peace, hopefully, at the end of it. I believe that it all depends on the parties of the agreement and acting in good faith in that agreement in order to ensure that no collapse happening to that deal.
And as well as the Qatari Prime Minister, we've just in the last few minutes heard from the US President Joe Biden. In his final days in office, he has sought to claim his own part in this success, saying that the contours of this deal was something that he laid out in May and that he has fought very, very hard with continual diplomacy to get it to fruition. This is what he had to say from the White House just a few moments ago.
Long last, I can announce a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached between Israel and Hamas. More than 15 months of conflict that began with Hezbollah's brutal massacre on October the 7th. More than 15 months of terror for the hostages, their families, the Israeli people. More than 15 months of suffering by the innocent people of Gaza. Fighting in Gaza will stop, and soon the hostages will return home to their families.
Now, President Biden went on to say that the reason that they had been able to reach this ceasefire deal was not only the diplomacy, but it was the efforts that have gone on by different nations around the world to try and reduce the support that Hamas had. He said also geographical factors have played into this, the weakening of Iran, the weakening of Hezbollah, and the fall of the Assad regime. But the one thing that he didn't acknowledge is the one thing that most people think has made the biggest difference to these talks and to getting this deal done. And that is the fact that in the next week we will see a change in the presidency and Donald Trump coming into office. And I think that there is very much a sense that that is what has shifted the dial here. It is the fact that Israel and Hamas knew that they were going to face an awful lot of pressure from the Trump administration to try and get this deal sorted out, that they were able to get to this point now. Here in Israel and also in Gaza tonight, there is a hope that after 15 months of the most dreadful depravity and brutality, this may finally be the beginning of the end.
Emma Murphy in Hostage Square in Tel Aviv, thank you. And we will, of course, be bringing you up to date with all of this later on News at 10. But in the meantime, still to come on the ITV Evening News, we take a look at the BAFTA nominations as Conclave takes the lead.
And it's been less cold today, but there are signs of another cold snap on the horizon. Just how cold will it get? Join me for the full national forecast that's coming up in a couple of minutes.
Oh dear, another cold snap. Well, do join me and Alex after the break. We'll see you then. It's time for the weather now, and Alex is on the Greenwich Peninsula in East London this evening, and some great views available there, Alex, if the weather allows.
Good evening, Mary. Well, on the whole, the weather is behaving itself, although we've got very thick grey skies overhead, which you can probably just about make out against the backdrop of the cable carts which are going over towards the Docklands. So it gives you a sense of where we are, in fact, just next to the O2. But Greenwich Peninsula is alive and kicking at the moment. And thankfully it is, because we've had grey skies overhead, as I mentioned before. But this place is dedicated to artwork, and it has brought a welcome splash of colour over the last couple of weeks and will continue to do so. In fact, we've got 6 of Damien Hirst's pieces being displayed here, all bright, all largely colourful, and certainly interesting to come and look at. The weather has been settled, as I said before. Overhead, grey skies, but this hasn't been the case up and down the country. It's been very variable. In fact, across Scotland, Northern Ireland, it's been very clear and sunny, in fact quite mild, nearly 16 degrees across eastern parts of Scotland. And as we take a look at the pressure sequence, as we run that, you'll notice that the high pressure stays very much in control as we head over the next few days. So largely dry conditions, although there could be a bit of drizzle here and there and some fog patches to watch out for. Let's take a look at that forecast right now.
Visibility may be low this evening as the cold weather hits. Heinz Soups sponsors ITV National Weather.
Well, when I arrived here earlier today, there certainly was a bit of patchy drizzle, and that really has been the story across the southeast through much of today. As we head through the next few days, the emphasis is on drier conditions for many parts of the British Isles, and temperatures, as you may have heard, are expected to take a bit of a dip as we get to the latter part of this week, creeping into the weekend. Let's take a zoomed in look at the pressure pattern for the next 24 hours, and you can see Although we have the high pressure still very much in control, towards the end of the week into the weekend, it will start to get squeezed out. But as I say, for the time being, largely settled conditions. So for this evening, I'm afraid we're going to hold on to that cloud cover out towards the southeast. And as we head a little bit further northwest, say into the Midlands, across that central swathe of the country, well, it's quite clear here, but we could also see some fog patches developing overnight. Locally, they could be quite dense. Across Scotland, stays very quiet. Northern Ireland as well. Clearer conditions here, and also some fairly chilly temperatures where we've got those clear breaks. So heading into tomorrow, where we've got the overnight clear breaks is where we'll see the best of any sunshine as we head into tomorrow. But again, across the southeast, we are going to hold on to those thicker grey skies. We're expecting it to stay largely on the dry side. Temperatures maybe dropping by a degree or so into single digits, certainly across some parts. Then looking at the latter part of the week, increasing amounts of cloud cover on Friday in particular, and then into the weekend, temperatures do drop, particularly out towards the east.
Heinz Soups sponsors ITV National Weather.
Well, that's the way it is looking here at Greenwich Peninsula this evening. Dry overhead, Mary, and also a little breezy next to the Thames. So I'm going to run for cover.
All right. Alex, thank you. And finally tonight, the fires in Los Angeles have, of course, meant that Hollywood's awards season have felt rather different this year. This week's Oscar nominations were delayed, but today the shortlist for the BAFTAs went ahead as planned. Conclave, Emilia Perez and The Brutalist were the big winners, as our arts editor Nina Nana reports.
It is an old-style Hollywood epic, more than 3 hours long, 7 years in the making. A film about an Hungarian architect who survives the Holocaust and comes to the US after the war to chase the American dream.
These are yours. Yes. Tell me, why is an accomplished foreign architect shoveling coal here in Philadelphia?
Today, fresh from its Golden Globe success, The Brutalist was awarded 9 BAFTA nominations, including one for British actress Felicity Jones.
Putting something in the world that is so full of integrity and a beautiful piece of cinematic art that it has come to fruition and that it's so beloved is just fantastic.
What does all the awards recognition mean?
Well, I think it's remarkably humbling and gratifying to have your work appreciated. It's a complex moment. You know, we have a lot of loss and tragedy within our industry, so it makes it difficult to feel celebratory in many respects.
The Pope is dead.
With 12 nominations, it is Conclave, the Vatican-based drama that rules. Amongst its nods, Best Film, Best Actor for Ralph Fiennes, and for the film's director, who has nothing but praise for his team.
It's such a gift, it's such a pleasure, especially because, you know, we're going to get together and celebrate. And to share this gift and surprise with so many is really, really gratifying.
Other British hopefuls include Cynthia Erivo. Her film Wicked has made more than £500 million at the box office. Now it has 7 BAFTA nods. She will take on another Brit, Marianne Jean-Baptiste, for Best Actress.
Look at you! Fix your face!
But to win, they have to beat Carla Sofia Gascon, the first transgender actress to get a BAFTA nod. Her film, Emilia Perez, getting 11 nominations in all. And all those actresses will take on the Queen of the Golden Globes, Demi Moore.
I'm fine. Everything's fine.
Up for her first BAFTA, the Best Actress category, surely the most hotly contested. Nina Nanar, ITV News.
And that's all from us this evening. Julie will be live from Tel Aviv at 10, but from me and all the evening news team, bye-bye.